Welcome everyone officially. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this wonderful conversation that we're really excited to have with Heather Trewstar on behalf of the fourth floor. The topic today, we are going to discuss board composition and how it's shifting faster than ever before. Our special guest today is Heather Wolf from Trewstar. But before we dive into the substance of our discussion today and an introduction of Heather, I do just want to say a very brief word about the fourth floor. For those of you who don't know what we're all about, we match startups and companies to board-ready women in a trusted, efficient, and cost-effective way. We are doing this to overcome systemic barriers that have kept women out of the board candidate pipeline historically. We also are matching underrepresented founders and fund managers with women angels and LPs. And this is largely because women invest differently than men, and that difference will unlock trillions of dollars for all of us. If you are not part of the fourth floor community, please consider joining us. What this means is that if you are a founder of a company, a startup, a company, or if you work for a company looking to succeed by leveraging powerful advisory and governing boards, then your company or your startup can join the fourth floor for a small annual fee and be matched to board-ready women in this trusted, efficient, and cost-effective way. You can also pay it forward by nominating qualifying women in your organization to join us as board candidates on the other side of the marketplace, so they too can advance their for-profit board careers. On an individual level, if you are listening to this, you are a woman, you are interested in advancing your board career, your for-profit board career, or getting started investing, then please consider joining us directly. You can do this without an employer nomination. If you're ready to go and you want to do it directly yourself, you can go to our website. You can purchase a membership for an annual fee. The other way to do it is to be nominated by your employer if your company is joining. So please, to learn more about this, come to one of our platform tours. We do them every Monday from 12 to 12:30. We'll put the link in the chat right now so you can sign up. We think the platform tour is a great way to get oriented, see how the platform works, how you actually get going. And this is the case if you are a company or if you are an individual. So we hope to see you. And then the other thing is board boot camp. We do this periodically every 6 weeks or so. The next one is actually coming up February 1st from noon to 2 p.m. Eastern time. That link is also being dropped in the chat. We're also giving you a code, so you don't have to pay a fee to attend it. Strongly recommend you come to Board Bootcamp as well. It is even better than the platform tour to learn what we're all about, but also more importantly, to really get started, either building out and leveraging your boards if you are a founder of a company, or getting started on your own for-profit board career if you're a candidate. So we hope to see you there at Board Bootcamp. Enough about us. Let's get to the point of today, which is really Heather of Trewstar. Heather is incredibly accomplished. She has spent nearly 2 decades working with corporate directors to increase board diversity and enhanced board performance. This includes the past 5 years that Heather has spent as a recruiter, and she's been specialized in the placement of corporate directors, as well as developing governance offerings for the Financial Times. I think that was maybe before these last 5 years, but you did that for a long time. She has also worked with hundreds of board chairs, CEOs, and independent directors. She knows everything about how to fulfill their talent needs, and also she has helped moderate their deliberations on the seminal governance issues of the day. So she is certainly an authority on this topic. Trewstar is a boutique search firm. For those of you that don't know of Trewstar, it is focused on talent at the board level. It is 100% woman-owned and operated, which is awesome. No other search firm has their depth of experience and singular focus in this one unique area in the corporate world. So if you don't know about Trewstar, we really recommend that you check it out. So that's the introduction. Now, Heather, let me turn the stage over to you to give that a little more context and a little more color. Let everyone know a little bit more about your background and what brings you to this topic today.
Thank you, Breen and Kat, for having me. I've been a frequent flyer at the fourth floor since the early days. They've been kind enough to have me for several events, including the aforementioned Board Bootcamp, which I did several times and loved. So thanks for having me back. For this AMA, I had to Google what that meant when Kat and Breen said, would you consider doing an AMA with us in January? And I said, well, I'm sure I would. I just wish I knew what it was. Anyway, I know what it is now. Ask me anything. And I do mean that sincerely. I hope you will ask me anything. The other very cool thing that's happening this morning is, sorry, I guess it's just gone afternoon, is that I see one of our placed candidates posted the first comment in the chat. So Anne Alonso, I'm going to embarrass you and call you out, but we placed Anne on a public company board. I've lost track of how many years ago, maybe 1 or 1.5 now. Anyway, really fun to have one of our own here. Of course, now she can double check me on all the things I say. So I guess that's a little risky as well. Yeah, our passion at Trewstar is bringing diverse candidates to the attention of our clients. Our clients are anything from typically a Series A kind of venture-backed company up through the Fortune 50. In fairness, we do more with venture and private equity-backed companies and small and medium cap public companies than we do with the large caps. The big search firms have those pretty sewn up. It's not to say we never work at the Fortune 500 level. We do, but it's not our everyday. And I realize for many of you on the call, even a Series A company feels a ways off and aspirational. So I may be talking in those terms more than where you are today. But as with any journey, you want to look ahead and see where you're going. And hopefully I can provide insights that are not only useful today on your journey, but as you march up the ladder, be it in your entrepreneurial path or a corporate path. So I'll take a breath and let you direct me to the next question.
Amazing. Okay, so let's dive right in. First question, what is the general sentiment regarding diversity efforts in corporate board circles today? So these corporate board circles you just described, and are other priorities taking the place of diversity?
It's a huge topic at Trewstar team meetings, as you can imagine, because we've hung our shingle out as the diversity specialists. You have to really hope that that's a business model and a mission that we can sustain because the appetite is there. It's been crazy. I would say from mid-2020 to about the end of last year, call it the end of 22, diversity was flavor of the year, big time. We did well over 90 placements during the height of the pandemic, if you will, and 94% of our placements were women and or people of color. And I would say the switch flipped at the murder of George Floyd. The demand pivoted 180 degrees towards racial and ethnic diversity. And it's been kind of a dream. It's what we've been waiting for decades in some instances, to have this demand for diversity so strong. So then two things happened, which sort of haven't spoiled the mood, but dampened the mood. The first is that California had 2 laws on their books, as you may recall, around board diversity. The first that was passed was mandating women on boards of California headquartered companies. And the second was mandating racial and ethnic diversity and sexual diversity, gender diversity as well. So we applauded that. Mandates or quotas are a bit of a blunt instrument, but it tends to get movement. And these laws got tremendous movement. And then they were overturned. They were thrown out in the courts. So that made everybody nervous everybody like me, who really cares about continuing to diversify boardrooms. And we really worried that it would put the brakes on boards' desire to continue to diversify. It has not. It's been so gratifying. It's kind of like the shot was already sent across the bow and it was taken very seriously. And it was in place just long enough for directors sitting around tables of boards that had newly diversified to say, oh my gosh, this is a better board. These people are fabulous. Where have they been? Because they are, right? We know there's no supply issue. And every time you add a new director, a new voice, a new pair of eyes and ears, enrich the business if they're qualified. And of course, it's our job to make sure they are. And so that's been great. Look, and it has also helped that the three largest institutional investors, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, have still kept their foot on the pedal around board diversity, as has NASDAQ, as has Goldman Sachs, when they talked about not taking a company public without at least a certain amount of diversity. So whilst the California turnaround was momentarily alarming and a little sad, the trend continues. So that's all great news. What's a little less good news is that the economy is softer. We just don't have the flow of SPACs that were sucking up a lot of new board members as they found merger partners and went public via SPAC merger. IPOs, as everyone knows, have flatlined very much in 2022 and into 2023. And so that's a little bit of a pity in that those sorts of boards in their preparations to go public were a great source of newly diverse candidates for us. I'll just keep talking if that's okay, because I have another great point to make.
Right, it was a great point, and I know, yes, please.
Okay, so to make up for some of those flow losses, if you will, a great thing has happened simultaneously. And I hope that you all in the audience are seeing this in some ways in your ecosystems, and that is venture capital firms and private equity firms are relatively newly quite interested in diversifying their boards. That has been kind of the last bastion of the good old boy network, and they know it. And some firms that we work with actually have declared diversity goals like out loud. They talk about their goals for numbers of non-white males on their boards and on their management teams, and they're really holding themselves accountable. And so that whole world of portfolio companies, of VCs, big and small, private equity companies, big and small, really out there actively looking for diverse candidates is heaven sent, because that's just so many more board seats available than the Russell 3000 can provide in any given year. So that's been super gratifying.
Right. Yeah, no, that is fantastic. And certainly, that's a lot of what we're seeing, and a lot of the partners that we're making partnerships are with venture funds and groups like that for this very reason, because there is this growing awareness and this interest. And so we definitely want to capitalize on that where we can, because to your point, the S&P 500 or the Russell 3000, that's a relatively small number of companies in the United States. There's actually many, many more companies. They're just not, we just don't tend to talk about them, especially when it comes to statistics, because it's a black box and we don't know, because there is no diversity legislation and there's no reporting legislation either. So there's no transparency, which is a lot of, what we're trying to crack at the fourth floor. Wonderful. So, okay, I actually see a question that came in the chat. So let me just read you this question, Heather, and then we'll go back to our regularly scheduled questions. Okay, so from Tammy McMiller, do you find that there is a need for board talents that is focused on data management, digital transformation, and data security? If yes, I would like to speak with you offline. Okay, so you're going to have to do that. Yeah,
the board skills, the board skills matrix, if you will, is a whole section we could talk about. And absolutely, in terms of cybersecurity, data privacy, analytics, machine learning, and AI for all of the above, and the umbrella over it all, if we could just call digital transformation, 100%. Loads of our specs for board searches we conduct revolve around those areas. There's no two ways about it. A tricky aspect, though, to being a digital expert or a data expert or a privacy expert or a cyber expert or whatever each of you might be, is that that's fine and that's sought after. But you also have to be really honest with yourself and say, but is that mostly all I would bring to the boardroom? Or am I a well-rounded director that will weigh in right across the agenda, not just when it's in my sweet spot, but also, will I have a point of view that's helpful and credible on finance and process and controls and audit? Will I have a point of view on human capital considerations, CEO evaluation, compensation, and succession questions? So the problem with being a really great expert is that sometimes you're that to the exclusion of everything else. And that's a little bit of a, that would hold you back a little bit for a corporate board where they wouldn't expect you to be a one-trick pony in the boardroom. Now, conversely, what many companies are doing, large and small, and we are helping some of them, but many of them do it on their own, and that is creating advisory boards around these kinds of specialties where they either can't attract or afford an in-house team that is highly specialized, for example, in state-of-the-art, let's stick with data analytics and data privacy. And therefore, they recruit a small advisory board. It's typically 3 to maybe up to 7 people on the advisory board who are very expert in their fields and who contract a certain amount of hours per year, if you will, to help with that bit of the company's oversight and advancement, to open doors for the company in those areas so that they are getting the best service providers and that kind of thing. And that can be a wonderful experience, first of all, because you're getting to know a company from the inside as an advisor. You're getting to know your fellow advisory board members, whom presumably you wouldn't have known before because they were, freshly assembled with you to provide this expert advice. And if the company loves you and the insights you provide and the way you work with management and the board, there is also an opportunity that they would ask you to join their main board at some point in time when they had an opening that looked like you. So big advocates of choosing, the right advisory boards for yourself when offered, when you really do think you can add value. I think it's a great way to get one step closer to a corporate board.
Love that. Especially because it is so core to our thesis and what we're doing, and just really great points. And also that the response to that expertise question, really, really helpful. And so on that note, can you talk a little more about trends that are worth noting with respect to the types of new directors getting selected? So you just talked a little bit about that in terms of cyber, digital transformation, the difference between advisory and governing, but what other considerations are out there?
Well, things that make us really happy are how human capital specialists are being welcomed into boardrooms. HR was kind of the last bastion of, the board director hot pool. And suddenly, as you probably all know in your daily lives, the chief people officers, chief HR officers within companies have been under a tremendous amount of pressure and have really either helped companies move forward effectively or not. You know pretty quickly if you've got the right person in that job during a pandemic and B, a raging war for talent, particularly in technology, software engineering, and so forth. So as boards sat around and endlessly talked about their human resource challenges, and then they kind of looked left and right and went, but wait, we don't have anyone on this board who can speak authoritatively about the trends in the industry and so forth. So that's one great area. Again, you can't just be an HR specialist or with a deep specialty in compensation or talent acquisition or management development to the exclusion of all else. But if you are that well-rounded HR executive who's been in your own leadership meetings and who has supported the board at your own company, that could be in many ways, but often the HR professional supports the compensation committees directly. We think you're a great board candidate.
Awesome.
So that's a nice new one. And it's interesting because we meet a lot of women who have other responsibilities and also look after HR in their companies. So sometimes it's they're the general counsel, corporate secretary, and also have that oversight management role, executive role at for HR, or IT is sometimes put under, or HR is sometimes put under IT rather. So it's nice when you bring a couple sets of skills like that, where you've been involved in two major areas of a company, and you're kind of a twofer in that respect in terms of your expertise.
Right. And what about lawyers? So so maybe just a little bit about general counsel. I know at one point you were speaking about that shift, and how's that doing? Are chief legal officers, general counsels still seen as a missing and viable voice around the table?
An additive, I would call it an additive voice around the table. Yeah, we certainly see general counsel getting board seats. As with anyone who gets a board seat, it helps if you were with a Fortune 500 company in that role. It just does. Same if you're a CFO, same if you're a chief marketing officer, or any other role you've played. It's helpful if you've been in a situation where there's brand recognition of the company. But having said that, the GC's challenge is no different really than the CFO who serves as an outside director, or the chief HR officer who serves as an outside director, is to understand you're not there to be the lawyer. You're not there to be the accountant or the finance lead. You're not there to be the chief people officer. You're there to provide oversight across the entire enterprise. So, as long as a GC can demonstrate they're not there to substitute for the company's own in-house counsel, or their advisor, other legal advisors to the board, they have an awful lot to add. They are in every room where everything's always discussed at a company. They've probably spent more hours in boardrooms than most independent directors, because of the nature of the work of a general counsel. And in-house lawyers have an easier path to the boardroom, I would say, than other types of lawyers.
Well, and also to your point earlier, many GCs are also overseeing HR, or maybe they're very closely connected to privacy and data security. So, those other skill sets as well, they could bring to the table. So I think those are all great points. What about first-time directors and or younger directors? So is there also for age diversity?
For sure. We proudly tout our firm statistic, that 50% on a year in and year out basis of our placed candidates are getting their first corporate board placement, which is not a coincidence. We advocate very heavily for first-time directors. We firmly believe it's the only way the pool will grow, right? Or the pie will expand. Otherwise, you're just doing one-to-one replacements, and we never make progress. So absolutely. And fortunately, that with the call for diversity, that message is finally being understood, that if you don't take a chance on a first-time director, you simply cannot continue to diversify your board. So, our comeback to take a chance on a first-time director is kind of really, you look at the accomplishments of these people in their careers, and where they've been, and what they've achieved, and how they've, succeeded, gone from rung to rung, and you think they're not going to be able to figure out corporate governance. It's kind of silly. And then the other way that we help boards accept a first-time director is to say, but look at all the board experience you already got. Support this person. Somebody be her mentor, somebody be her board buddy, somebody be directly responsible for making sure she's onboarded appropriately and is soaring in no time. So, you kind of put it back on them to say, why, you can't handle a first-time director? Of course you can. You're old veterans. We got our tricks, but it's really important. And age diversity is important too, really important on a board. Really, we have a client company right now whose chair of the tech committee is turning 80 imminently. And it's like a fabulous guy, tons of energy, very connected, but it just, it doesn't pass the today's test of, tech expertise at the board level. Feels like somebody who's closer to a digital native. And so that happily has encouraged boards to consider younger people. But back to my earlier statement of it's fine being younger and it's fine, being super bright, but are you that well-rounded director who's going to be able to contribute and hold his or her own in a boardroom across the full agenda?
Right. Okay, great point, and a great segue into the next question. Although before we go there, I just want to ask you another question that came in the chat. When a board needs help in working on their own governance issues, issues and dynamics, do you have resources that you'd recommend, such as Board Source, or I think like On Board, or I know there's some others.
There's so many great sources, absolutely. Lot of writing on governance. For example, the big four audit firms all have whole divisions, and they're big and they're great around governance. EY is called Center for Board Matters. Deloitte's is called something else. KPMG and PwC call them something else altogether. But the gist of it is around a whole body of work dedicated to corporate governance. And they do events, virtual and in person. NACD, the National Association of Corporate Directors, is another great resource. You have to join to do certain things, kind of like the fourth floor. Members get certain privileges and non-members get others. But anyway, a great body of work around all aspects of board governance, and most certainly around the issues and the dynamics to be handled. They all probably would do, if you got to a point where you really needed an intervention on a board, they all are capable of doing that. We've also done that where the board just needs a serious rethink. And sometimes that's just a question of, boards being, I would call it, either lazy or reluctant to refresh themselves. They know they have issues. They know they need to get rid of certain directors and bring in new skills, but they're reluctant to do it because it's hard. These are their peers and it's hard to tell them they're finished. But anyway, there are people who will also come in and do that, whatever, one day or half day facilitated intervention if you're really at a crisis point and it's holding you back.
Right, that's a great question. And it also reminds me of BoardWise and the work Donna Hamlin does, which is a partner of the fourth floor. I think that's a lot of the work they do with companies that need that type of refresh. So, for the audience member who has that question, I'm sure Heather could make some referrals. We could also, for instance, recommend Donna, but there are resources out there. Okay, another question actually just popped up in the chat, so let me get to that before we go on to our other main question. You mentioned current events affecting board placements, politics, the world. What changes, if any, have you seen in specific industries recruiting for board seats? So that's question number one. After you answer that, we'll go to question number two.
One of the trends, and I'll touch on Ann Alonso again, as I mentioned, our placement, who is excitingly here with us. One of the trends is that companies, particularly who maybe are struggling with their ESG messaging, are looking for experts who can help them on the right path. There's a lot of new disclosure demands. There's a lot of shareholder interest, at least in public companies, around putting issues onto the proxy for a vote around things like environmental sustainability, carbon footprint, water usage. That's kind of the E part of ESG, if you will. So individuals who have really strong resumes around environmental sustainability are, I would call that a new trend, and I would call it a trend in companies that are maybe kind of traditionally big polluters. That could be, oil and gas, energy, that could be chemicals, that could be agriculture. There's a whole list of your airlines, who are your classic large carbon footprints, looking for that kind of help. So I would call that a really strong new industry sector trend.
That's great. That's an amazing insight. Okay, next question from Lori Keith. Any advice for transitioning to a for-profit board opportunity from not-for-profit board experience? That's also a great question.
It is, and I'm sure all of us, all of us on this call do our bit in the nonprofit world, and as we know, it can be time consuming, but it also can be very gratifying and very instructive. So I would say a couple of things. One is, of course, on your resume and on your LinkedIn, note your nonprofit affiliations. I would say note them. I'm going to just use the word appropriately. So don't oversell them, because in a way they're seen as a turnoff to, if you're assuming that, because if you put in your headline, I'm a this, I'm a that, and I'm a board member, and then they see you're a board member of something that they've never heard of, and it definitely looks nonprofit. It's just a little bit of a oversell that I don't think is helpful. I think one should include it somewhere on the CV and the LinkedIn, but maybe not your headline, unless it's, a substantial organization. Maybe you chair the you chair the board of the organization. Maybe you chair the audit committee. Maybe you chair some other, if you have a really substantial role on a substantial nonprofit, it could be a university or a college board that, you chair the finance committee, or you sort of see where I'm going here. In that instance, I think it can be a credential that you want to talk about on a path to a corporate board, but kind of have perspective. Is it really? The other thing is, with your nonprofit affiliations, are there other people on those boards who also serve on corporate boards? So, they may be giving their time to the same cause you are, but could they, with a short mention or conversation, could they maybe be helpful to you in their other settings, where they spend their time, including perhaps a corporate board? That I hear a lot is, I got my first board seat because someone I sat with on a nonprofit board also sat on the board of ABC and recommended me because he or she liked, how I behaved in the boardroom and felt like I made a valuable contribution. So that's a nice use for your nonprofit time and energy.
No, that's a great point. I mean, network are everything. They can often be the point. So it's a whole other network to tap into. So I think that's an excellent point. Okay, so taking a deeper dive on this topic, what preparations can aspiring directors be undertaking today to position themselves for corporate board positions tomorrow, especially with bigger companies?
Well, I'm famous for saying, it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. The best thing you can be doing is killing it in your day job, and really making a resume you can be very proud of, because honestly, it's your body of work, from your schooling right up through whatever you've done to date in the business world, that is going to get you a board seat at the end of the day. Now, more tactically, what you can be doing is looking to be as well-rounded as possible. And I've already talked about this a couple of times, but the point is you're in the job you're in, but what else could you stretch to? And when you're an entrepreneur trying to get your business started, this is probably really bad advice because you are stretched. I get that. But if you're in a more of a company job, look for opportunities to take on more. Look for an opportunity to have a small P&L or something to run that's really yours, so that you keep ratcheting yourself up that ladder of someone who can relate to all parts of what boards deal with, because you've done them in a small way, or maybe in a not such a small way. You've done them. So, raise your hand when opportunities arise, when a new initiative needs to be stood up. Maybe that could be you. And if you have a job or a life right now where, you really aren't touching finance or accounting, it's kind of a blind spot for you, figure out how you can fill that blind spot, because it's really important for your own confidence, for others' confidence in you, that you really do understand how to read financial statements and what they mean, and how to ask questions when things change on financial statements, that you really understand audit reports and can weigh in on concerns. It'll just make you a stronger person. That could be maybe getting closer to somebody who's a financial expert, kind of deliberately working elbow to elbow with him or her whenever you can to sort of get inside their head and see how they think and work. I'm not suggesting anyone who doesn't already have one, get an MBA or become a CPA. That's a little extreme, but if if you can see a path to making yourself a stronger in the finance area, it will benefit you, I think, across everything you touch.
That's a great point. And are there any other typical blind spot areas that you've come across? So finance is a big one.
It is.
But are there others?
That's really the one that boards mention a lot. I would say the only other thing is just instinctively boards gravitate towards operators. And so I used that word a couple of times, I think, in my last answer, but focus on it for a minute here. So who's an operator? Well, a CEO is an operator, of course, the ultimate operator, if you will. Division presidents who run portions of companies are operators. Is a CFO or a GC an operator? They're not thought of that way. But if a GC, for example, there's a new regulation coming down the pike at your company, for example, and the GC says, let me run with that. Let me run with setting up a team, understanding the new regulation, making sure we got the systems, processes, and controls ready, and that'll be my baby. Or maybe the GC or the chief HR officer or someone else in the company has been involved in evaluating an acquisition, and now that acquisition is about to close. Why not say, let me run it. Let me run the integration. I've understood throughout the process what the challenges are and the business we're buying. Let me be the one to run, integrate it and get it running. So, just little ways that you can kind of put your hand on your heart later and say, yeah, I've run something, I get what CEOs do, because in my own small way, I've been in that hot seat.
That's such good advice. Thank you for that. Another question came in the chat. Do you have any do's and don'ts of board bios? And
yes.
Then resumes.
Yeah, this is going to be a countercultural answer. Because I know whole cottage industries have popped up around board bios and board CVs. We at Trewstar just don't like them at all. To us, your resume is your resume. It's what you've done, where you've done it, how you've moved on. It tells your story. And to try to just chop and change and regurgitate that into something that sounds slicker, to me, just ends up saying almost nothing. I read a board bio and I think, okay, now what did this person do and where did they work and how many years and were they promoted? And it's just not helpful. You can't pick words that are unique. We all use the same ones. I'm a leader, I'm strategic. Well, of course you are. You've gotten this far in your career. So, my advice is, if you feel you have to put some paragraph at the front of your CV that summarizes your body of work, that's then illustrated below in a chronological, detailed, well-organized way, great, sum it up for me, but don't pretend it's a substitute for the bits below. And again, that's not super popular. Everybody's writing board bios, but the minute we get a board bio from someone, we say, great, please send us your resume as well. Because it's what's useful. And just while we're on your kind of documentation, I can't stress enough how important LinkedIn is in this world. We all, whether we're recruiters or companies, talent people themselves who are looking for people, all depend very heavily on LinkedIn. Partly because it's going to be the most up-to-date database in the world, because everyone's self-motivated to keep it up to date. And so even if we receive your resume or your board bio, put it in our database at Trewstar, you change something in 3 months, we're out of date. So we're going to look at LinkedIn and see if LinkedIn's up to date. So keep it up to date. I encourage people to be detailed. You know, the old days when your CV or your resume was supposed to fit on one page, well, those were the old days. That's when we printed things and passed them around offices. Now they're all electronic. Who cares how long they are? You know, add detail. If I don't want to read it, I won't read it. I'll move on. If I want the detail, it's there. So I would say that we have to all kind of switch to a electronic mindset around our board or our materials, whether they're board materials or you know, the other things you create, and just be disciplined about the facts and use kind of creative selling language sparingly. It would be
Right.
my hope.
Yeah, no, those are great points, great insights. I know I've heard, and people do have different opinions about the documents that you want to use to prepare yourself. One thing that I've heard from a number of sources is take your regular resume and don't rework it or rewrite it, just maybe change it from a temporal organization to a skills-based organization. So that's one suggestion I've heard, but I see on your face that might not be the advice you would give. But I think
I just want to know where I'm going to get the skills if I understand the jobs you've held at the companies you've been in. I'm going to figure out what your skills were pretty quickly, I think. But again, as I say, it's not it. I think we're swimming against the tide as
well, but
people who
I mean, also the big takeaway here is that there isn't one right way to do it. So, you know, depending on who you talk to, there are different opinions. You know, I think probably the most important thing is not to feel so intimidated about what is the perfect, correct way to do this thing, but rather just, you know, start moving forward. So even if you're just, everyone has a resume, you're looking to that resume, start there. Okay, right. So from, you know, Heather Wolf's point of view, that's a great way to do it. So, so I think that is really important for people to hear that and internalize that. There's also a question about letters of interest.
I'm not sure what a letter of interest is.
Me neither. So, okay, thought you might know. Kathy, Herman, if you want to give us a bit more context in the chat, then we'll do a better job answering your question. Thank you for the question. But okay, while we're waiting on that, let's move to the last question, which is about networking. So what type of networking is effective when you're seeking a board role? And I feel like we've talked about this in, you know, indirectly over the course of this discussion, but love to hear your point of view on this topic directly.
Well, just for context, the kind of rule of thumb, I don't know that anyone keeps exact statistics on this, but anecdotally, you'll hear that headhunters, recruiting firms, search firms place some 30% of directors on boards, which obviously leaves you a huge number of board seats, which we don't touch or see or know about. And so how do they get filled? Friends and family. I mean, really, they are all about networking, professional affiliations, next door neighbors at barbecues. I mean, you hear the darndest stories about how people get their board seats. And so whilst getting in front of a bunch of search firms and making sure your materials are in their database is fine, it's not going to hurt, it's certainly not the whole story. So absolutely, think about touch points as you are on your journey that could be valuable to you. We've already talked about nonprofit board members perhaps being helpful, college and university, you know, that have people who have found their way, you know, even it's so funny. You hear about people like, I wrote to a fellow alumni at XYZ school and I didn't think she'd remember me or he, you know, have any interest in helping me. And he was so excited that I'd written him and, you know, couldn't have been more helpful. So you know, don't let ancient history feel like it's a barrier. People love to be thought of. And if they can, they love to help. And so, you know, I would say, make it easy to help you. Be clear about the ask. And you don't have to be over detailed. But if you have a specific ask, just make it quickly and simply. And yes or no is an acceptable answer. Yes, I can help you. No, I can't. Fine. Don't be offended if it's no. But do the people you're networking with a favor by, being as direct and specific as you can. The other, oh, we're going to get my family through the door here, it sounds like. So I'm
hopefully not in ski clothes and ski boots.
Total ski clothes and ski boots. 100%.
Okay. Yeah, no, well, thank you.
Here we go, moving together.
Okay, well, you're on the move. Okay, well, while you're moving, I'll just mention that, obviously we think an entrepreneurial focused network is also a great network to tap into to get started, because early stage companies are building out advisory boards and governing boards, and they are frequently more open to first-time directors or people getting started. So that's obviously the fourth floor ecosystem and network, which is an opportunity to meet many people you would not otherwise meet, who are CEOs of small companies that are actively searching for talent. The other thing is the relationship aspect to networking that I think is worth mentioning, just how important those relationships are, because an advisor relationship, and is certainly a director relationship, it's a serious one. So it's contractual, or it's fiduciary, it goes on for years, it's a big deal. So people don't, people ease into those relationships. So getting to know people and progressing a relationship forward, also is important. And to the extent that there are networks that help you do that, that is just a great way to think about it. So now that you're resituated, I can turn it back over to you.
Well, the bottom line, I think, is the more you can get involved with groups that are really going to be enjoyable and productive. I would say don't just go join 100 women's organizations, and they're out there, believe me. There are especially the kind of women on board readiness programs and networks and alliances are very numerous. If you find people you like, join them and enjoy at a minimum, and hopefully get some networking help. But I think at the end of the day, it's really the people who see you in action, on a regular basis, who admire your work, to whom you've mentioned your interest in board service. You know how it works when somebody tells you something, like 3 days later, you're like, that's so weird, because this person just told me she was interested. It just sort of weirdly happens after learning something new or hearing about something. And, you want that to happen, right? You want that is so interesting, because Breen and I were just talking the other day about her interest. She'd be a great board member. So, just maximize those opportunities, be it in formal settings, like, the fourth floor and other terrific networking organizations, or just in your day-to-day.
Right. No, great. Thank you. I think really great point there. So the letter of interest, we have a little more context on that. So when a board opportunity has been posted, this attendee is saying that she has been asked to submit a letter of interest in that position.
Oh, great. Great. Yeah. I mean, if the position is for an operating role, obviously that's one thing, and I'm sure you're all in your comfort zones on that. If it's a letter of interest around a board role, I think, the onus is on you, I suppose, to make the connection between your professional experience and what the company you want to join is headed into. I would say one hint is to be very forward focused. Typically, a company is what it is today, but it's got a 5-year strategy, right? Or a 3-year strategy, or it doesn't matter the time frame. But anyway, it's going new places, growing, hopefully, expanding, and so forth. So I'd say both when you think about a position, and this could be good for an executive or an operating position as well as a board position, is think about yourself in that company's future. We talk to boards about that all the time. You look at your skills matrix and you think, oh, there's a check mark everywhere. We're fully loaded up on all the skills we need. And then you talk about, well, that's today. What are the big elements of your strategic plan that could alter that matrix and require you to think about different sorts of directors and backgrounds? And that's where we often get a lot of movement, is when we get them forward thinking.
Right. Oh, that just made me think of Web3. Out of curiosity, are you seeing, is that there yet on the horizon? Are you seeing companies thinking ahead? We're going to have a chief like Web3 officer in 5 years. So they're looking for those skills right now.
That's probably too neatly stated. What we're seeing much more of in terms of the skills, and this is true of advisory boards too, is the applications of AI, the applications of robotics in all kinds of settings, smart manufacturing, and all the ethics of that, especially in healthcare companies. The ethics of big data, the ethics of AI. So those are heavily on companies' minds. Yeah, those sorts of issues.
Yeah, no, great. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so one more question, not necessarily the last question. If you have additional questions, we still have a few minutes. So now would be a great time to put them in the chat. Here's an attendee asking about guidance you can provide on comp expectations ranges for startups and other private company boards. And then this person goes on to say it's not that comp is necessarily the primary reason for going for it, but what standards are there that you know?
Yeah, it's a really tricky question in the private company world. In public companies, comp is in the proxy. You can look it up. It's pretty well within a standard band, mixture of cash and equity, and away you go. It's a little more formalized also in the private equity ecosystem. It's, there's kind of some bands of, it's usually, small amount of cash and a fair bit of money at work, as they like to call it, or some form of warrant around future performance or a stock option. In the startup world, it is all over the map. And understandably, it's not usual it's not never that I've seen cash as one compensation tool. But if there is cash, it's usually very small. But some startups or small companies do like to pay a little bit of a cash stipend to kind of increase the seriousness with which the board takes the role. Sometimes it's in-kind services. So depending on the nature of the business, is there something you can give the director that you make, or the service you provide anyway? But more often than not, it's around an equity stake in the company. And what gets future directors really excited is, of course, they want to help you make it a bigger company, and they want to make the equity bigger. Now, there's a lot of tension there, right? Because founders should guard their equity very, very preciously. And so, that every decision is individual in terms of whether the prospective advisor or board member, what he or she is worth. And that's a really hard one to put a number on.
It's really tough.
And it's not my area of expertise, by the way.
Yeah.
So.
No, but I feel like that was a great answer and helpful. And for people listening, certainly Googling to try and get a sense where there is some transparency or there are some standard market bands, like in private equity or we like the FAST framework. We often recommend that as a reference point for early stage startups. That's FAST. You can access it online. I see that we've dropped in the chat some of our own resources and materials that touch on that. So there's like some frameworks that in certain communities that or ecosystems that get embraced. Private companies that are not startups, it definitely seems to be all over the map and industry specific, and it's hard to find even industry standard frameworks that are published. So, it is a bit of a black box, like so much connected to boards.
So much connected to boards. I just thought of something else about networking. Again, one of my obvious, but gonna say it. Women's organizations are fabulous. I work for an all-female firm, as Breen told you, and the fourth floor is all about supporting women in so many wonderful ways. But don't leave men out of your networking efforts. for boards in particular. I mean, in life in general, I would think, but you know, men are really great advocates for women getting into boardrooms in large numbers. So again,
Right.
perhaps
I think
obvious, but there you go.
No, it's an excellent point, and it's why our board seat exchange is not limited to women-led companies. It is open to all companies for that very reason, because we want to actually really have an impact on changing the demographics of all of these small company boards that are not paying recruiters to go out and fill seats. So how do we do that? Well, it's getting those men that own those companies, that run those companies, that are sitting around the boardrooms of those companies to think about pulling some other chairs up to the table. So that is exactly what we're trying to do. So men are part of the fourth floor ecosystem, you know, and they come in on the company side. But I think that, to your point, you can't ignore that. You know, it's great. Women need to help women, and we can make a lot of progress, but it needs to be an inclusive effort. And I think that that is a very good point. And that is an issue with the women's networking organizations that that maybe are not, you know, where you can't access both sides. Thank you for all of that, and thank you for these just excellent questions that have come in throughout this entire discussion. Really, the timing of this perfectly worked out. So with our, you know, 30 seconds left, and thank you, Heather, being cool under pressure with people coming back from the slopes and all of that. Very well done. But if you have a final takeaway, a final, you know, tangible takeaway thought to leave our audience with, maybe how to contact you directly if they think that you could provide value to them, the floor is yours to bring us home.
Absolutely. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's my go-to social media. If you feel you're a board ready candidate, and by board ready, think of my, you know, kind of Series A to Fortune 500 criteria, you're welcome to go to trewstar.com and submit your resume to us in that way. We'd be glad to have a look. We may not, we do get a pretty big flood of them, so we may not contact you, but you will be added to our database. And that's not a throwaway comment. Our database is our, you know, crown jewel, and it's our first go-to for every board search. So it's not like the circular file, you know, of yesteryear. And we welcome that. And I wish all of you great luck. I would say to you, founders and entrepreneurs, as you grow and scale, that is a hugely sought after board skill. Someone who has taken something from very small and built it to be sizable, whatever that ends up to be. We're often talking to companies who are newly about to commercialize. That could be a biotech company, that could be a tech company who focused on product, and they focused, you know, on so many, like regulation. They focused on so many aspects of getting the product to where it's ready that they're like, oh shoot, now we got to get out there and sell it. And so somebody who's done that commercialization phase, who's built the scaffolding around a go-to-market is really valuable. So thank you. Keep going, and as you build and grow, pro about that.
Yeah, thank you for that final takeaway, because founders, you too are board candidates, and thank you for making that point, Heather. We firmly believe that in the fourth floor, and that's a really good final takeaway. So thank you everyone for coming.